Hello world and all my friends and subscribers out there. So today's video is going to be about getting a nice even coverage with your acrylic paints. Now in this video I'm going to be specifically using Liquitex Basics, but this is only the first part, and the second part of this two-part series is going to be using other paints. Other acrylic paints, and I'll use a few different kinds just so you can see the differences between them. But because I had a request for Liquitex Basics, I'm going to be doing that today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that you can use this with any paints that you're using to paint your miniatures. If you're painting a flat surface, you can use any of these techniques. So firstly, I'm just going to show you some test pieces that I did. The first one I used with a white background, and you can see there's some streakiness in the blue and the red. And then the second piece I used a grey background, or grey prime, and I used two different blues and two different reds, and you can see they're quite different, but the overall coverage is better. So what I suggest is, as we go through, I'll just explain a little bit more about it, but with certain colours I would suggest using certain different primed colours. So I'm not saying you have to spray prime your miniatures all the same colour. You could just spray prime them grey and then paint over certain areas with white if you need to. That's a technique for painting yellow. I'm not sure if that's a well-known technique, but I've seen it around on the internet, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about that as we go along. So these are the colours I used from Liquitex Basics. I have the huge big tubes of Liquitex Basics. I'm not sure what everybody else has got. So I used the primary yellow, blue, and I substituted the ultramarine blue just because I think it's a better colour. Blue. And then I used the primary red and I substituted in cadmium red deep because it's a better red in my opinion, and of course titanium white. So I have these huge tubes because I do other art apart from painting miniatures. So I actually use these for other things which they work perfectly well for. But I, in my personal opinion, I wouldn't use them to paint minis because I just didn't like how they felt, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But hey, if you choose to use these, good for you. I highly commend you for using them because they're quite difficult to use. So what I'm doing now is just showing you my paintbrush that I'm going to be using to paint this flat surface. Now I'm using a round brush, a number 2, and it's got a long bristles, and that's because I want to use the sides of the bristles to paint, and that's going to give you really even coverage, as even as you can with these particular paints. So, I mean, of course you can use this technique with any paints you want to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got 3 shields that I've primed white to the best of my ability with my dry brushing technique. If you'd like to know a little bit more about that, I'll leave a link in the top corner for you. But of course you can spray prime and you'll probably get a better result. Now the first thing I'm going to do is, and I probably should have done it on all 3 of the white pieces, is I'm just going to paint over my dry brushed prime white with white again, just because I need to get a better coverage. And so this is how you would get a good coverage of white. I would suggest dry brushing it if you don't have a primer, and I think I did 3 or 4 coats of dry brushing to get it that white, and then I went over it with some watered down titanium white. And and you can kind of see here how I'm mixing it, and you can kind of see how I'm struggling to get the paint to mix in the water, but I'll give you a close-up shortly. So here I'm using the same technique with the yellow, and you can kind of see a bit better now that there's some colour, and how you use the side of your brush to kind of make your strokes as wide as possible, just because it stops the paint ridging up. It's a better way of explaining it, escapes me right now, but it's a physical ridge, so it's like a physical line in the paint, and that will obviously dry more opaque because there's more paint in that area and more pigments. So this Liquitex paint, if you haven't seen my previous video on Liquitex, which was just testing its opacity and talking about it a little bit in my testing acrylic paint properties video, I think that's what it's called. If not, I'll leave a link here for you. And the actual acrylic part of the paint, the medium they use is very unique in Liquitex Basics. I'm not sure if it's the same in the Liquitex Artist Acrylics or the heavy body acrylics, but what they use in this specific paint, it really kind of, it's almost like gelatin. It's got a very thick texture to it. Even if you add a lot of water, I think I might be showing this in this particular red. This is the primary red I'm using over the white, obviously, and I'm using it quite thin so that you can see just how thin it is, but it's still, how do I describe it? It's watered down, but the paint is still thick, and so it's a bit difficult to get the right consistency. But I show you close up how to get the right consistency in a minute. I'm not sure what I'm doing right now. Sorry about that. So I might be actually doing it off out of your camera view. So I'll just fast forward till I'm back in screen. Okay, I'm back in the shot. So I must have been doing something other than painting. So I'm putting this red, primary red, on in a very thin layer because otherwise it just ridges up too badly. And even when I'm trying here, you can see how badly the ridges are in it. So now I'm going to try the primary red, the cad red medium, and the ultramarine blue. I think that's ultramarine blue. On this next, yes, it's ultramarine blue. So this cad red medium is actually an opaque color, as I explained in my previous Liquitex video, which means that it has a lot more opacity in the pigment than the other paints do, because they're semi-transparent from what you can see on the tubes. So I'm just trying to get the best most even coverage on the shield as I can. Now this ultramarine blue gave me a lot of trouble. I think I'm not sure whether blues in general, I'm going to have to look into that. I just trouble colors to try and get even coverage with. But yeah, this one you'll see. So I start off pretty thin with it because from my test pieces I already knew it was going to be a little bit of trouble. And I did not want it to get too thick. like on the actual shield. I did not want any physical ridges or anything on the shield. Which, you know what, I've only ever had trouble with this paint doing that, and I'll give you a close-up of that later on. But if you are using this paint and you are getting a lot of streakiness, and it's frustrating you, then I would suggest maybe changing, if you can afford to, changing your acrylic paints. Because tell you what, I had a hard time trying to get this blue smooth. I even rinsed my brush, left it damp, and went over the shield again to try and get it as smooth as possible. It's something you can do also if you find you're getting, the ridges are getting a bit too opaque or transparent. So the whole trick to getting really even coverage basically is to have a nice even base coat. So your base coat should be totally as opaque and streakless as you can get it. That's the first thing that I would recommend. And if you're using white, even more so. And okay, so here I am showing a close-up of the paint and just how it looks. So as you can see, it does not want to mix with the watered down paint very easily at all. It's kind of and as you can see, I'm just showing you what texture it is here and how I would not use that on the model. I'd water it down a little bit more until the ridges weren't so pronounced in the paint when you're moving your brush through it. I think at this stage here I'm quite happy with it. It's not, how can you explain it? It's kind of standing in peaks like meringue would when you're whipping egg whites. I don't know how to explain that. I'm sure you've all made lemon meringue pie. It's pretty good. So I just wanted to show you a close-up of me putting it onto the model and how translucent it looks. Okay, so I'm just going to fast forward through all the layers here and show you what they look like. So this is my third layer and I'm going really fast, sorry about that. But as you can see, the cad red medium looks really good, and so does the yellow and white. So here is the fourth layer, and I'm really happy with the cad red. I'm actually going to stop at the fourth layer. It did really well, I'm really happy with it. And I'm also really happy with the white. I mean, the yellow looks really good on camera. I don't know if you can see what I'm seeing, but in real life it's still a little bit patchy. And so I'm going to keep on going with yellow. Yellow is a hard color, and really you need your white layer underneath the yellow to be completely smooth for yellow to look any good. Because what happens with yellow is it needs the white behind it to actually bounce light onto the white and back through the yellow for the yellow to be as bright as possible. And that's why when you put yellow over something like red or blue directly, you don't get the same results. It's disappointing. It doesn't show up yellow. So that's the reason why you need white paint underneath yellow of any kind, or colors with a lot of yellow in them, like greens and things like that. But I can talk about that a little bit more in a color theory video that goes a bit more in depth. So let's carry on to the fifth layer here, and I'm really happy with I think it's the red. Yes, the red in the middle, which is the primary red with the grey prime I'm very happy with that, and so I'm going to, and there I was just showing you the difference between the two primary reds, one with a white prime, one with a grey. So I stopped with the primary red and the grey. So now I'm right here at the 8th layer of the blue and the yellow, and also the primary red over white. And if you can see how I'm showing you here, there's actually, on the ultramarine blue shield, you can actually see some physical bumps. And I'm using really watered down paint here, and so you can see some physical bumps, and I was not happy with that. I was happy with how the red and yellow came out over the white. It's not perfect, but it'll do for me, and that's smooth for me, and I really thought that that would just be fine. But that blue, I mean, you can still see how streaky it is, and also it just got so thick on my shield there. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. This paint was difficult to use as a miniature paint, just because the medium they used in it. It's just a thick medium, and it does not thin with water, and it does not thin with alcohol either. It kind of stays that same thick gelatinous texture. So it can be done as you see here. I was able to use the 3 primary colors and get good results with white apart from the blue. So it's difficult to say how you would combat that. You would probably have to maybe kind of layer different colored blues. Start with a grey, add some blue into the grey, add a bit more blue into grey in the next layer, and so on until you got to the blue that you wanted. I mean, that's the only suggestion I can give you to get the blue to come out, you know, really smooth. And I would have to test that out as well for myself, but I'd say that that would work. However, that's not going to combat that thick consistency that you get with this paint. That just makes those physical ridges in the paint that personally I can't stand. And I work with some really cheap paints, so I'm sure that you know, there are some wonderful paints out there, and I haven't shown you those yet, and they're cheap and they're acrylic, and you can get them in any kind of hobby shop. And I still need to bring those up, and I will soon, because I feel like those are the best paints to paint miniatures with. Minimal watering down, fantastic coverage, matte finish. So keep watching. Stay tuned for one of the next videos. I will be shooting that video soon. I think the next video that I'm going to do is a brush care video, because I really feel like the internet needs one. I haven't seen a good one for miniature painters yet, so I'll do one of those, and that'll be my next video up. And then I will continue on with the coverage videos, and I will show the coverage you can get with other paints other than Liquitex Basics, just to show a comparison. Yes, you can get a good idea of the kind of limitations that you get with regular acrylic paints, and also what wonderful paints are out there that are just regular acrylic paints. So I hope that wasn't too much of a babbly video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and thank you to all my new subscribers. And welcome to my channel, and I really appreciate your subscription. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up button so I know you liked it. If you feel like any groups may benefit from this kind of video, please share it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye. I don't know if you can actually pick it up on camera, but this red in my opinion, is not red at all. And that's why I've left a little gap underneath